Hello and welcome to episode number 12 of the Take One podcast from All Sociology. My name's Ben, and today what we're going to be doing is looking at sociological theories of crime and deviance. So welcome to those of you who have listened to this before. Welcome to those of you who are new listeners to this. If you've not listened before, then this is a sociological podcast all done in one take, and I'm going to run you through what we're going to do today. So this pod is going to look basically at some of the sort of key ideas when we look at theories of crime and deviance. So I'm going to start out today by doing probably about 5-6 minutes on some introduction to the podcast. I've got a few things to say, a few shout outs to give, but then we're going to nip into the real nub of it by talking about some of the key theories and theorists. So we're going to look at functionalism, particularly the likes of Emil Durkheim and Robert Merton while we cover that. We'll also have a look at feminism, particularly the likes of Frances Hynenson. We've got to cover some Marxism, so we'll take a look at what the likes of William Chambliss as well as Karl Marx has to say on the purpose and the role of crime in society. The new right, which is often referred to as new right or right realists. So we'll be looking at the likes of Charles Murray when we have a look at what they have to say about things. The interactionist perspective, if you don't know what that is already, you will do. It's the likes of Howard Becker and labelling theory and how we come to label people as criminals. And then you've got to kind of cover subcultural theory when you do crime and deviance. So I'll finish off with that as well before we go into an outro, and I'll do some more shout outs. So this is a pod that's really going to look at some of these basic ideas of crime and deviance. It comes off the back of a podcast that I did with Leanne, which was, I think, podcast number 10 a little while ago, where we did a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the topics that you would likely to encounter on the A-level AQA spec. This podcast is a little bit more basic. It's going to cover, as I say, most of the key kind of theories that you're going to need to know about, and hopefully it will make sense to anyone from year 10 upwards, or year 9, I suppose, if you do GCSE year 9 as well. But it's really for GCSE and I suppose early level A-level students. If I'm going to put it somewhere in the, like pitch it somewhere, it's probably somewhere between year GCSE level and A level. So that gives you a bit of an idea. So yeah, how are we all doing, first of all, before we go into things any further? It's, what day is it? Oh my God, I'm totally losing track of the days. It's Friday, I think it's Friday the 3rd of April today. And if you're wondering why I'm not at school, then it's because we're on lockdown. I did a podcast, last podcast I did, all about the coronavirus. I talk a lot about it in there, but we're not at school. Students aren't at school, teachers aren't at school. I've been going in like twice a week, roughly, to do some kind of key worker childcare cover. Other than that, the place is locked up. So yeah, it's kind of a weird time at the moment. In my spare time, I've been doing bits and pieces, lots of marking, lesson stuff, communicating with students and all that, but also getting a bit of downtime as well. And one of the things I've been working on recently is on Instagram. You will probably be aware that I run the All Sociology Instagram account. And this month, April, what we're doing with that is we're doing what I'm calling a student takeover. So essentially, I've had some wonderful work off students over the last sort of year or so. And given the fact we're not at school at the moment, I thought rather than students bring work to me, let's bring work to students and to the internet. So essentially what I'm doing every day throughout April is throwing up a student piece of work onto my Instagram account, and they've all been very carefully selected. They're all the best of what I've had over the last year. So hopefully you will enjoy that. If you want to know how to get your hands on like a better copy of that, you can go over to my Facebook page as well. I don't know the address for that. You just have to go onto Facebook and like type in All Sociology. You'll find it, and I'm going to put all of the like high resolution pictures of those up there. So there's a bit of that. Right, we're 4 minutes in already, and well, 3 minutes in or so, and I'm still banging on about stuff. The drink this week, every week you'll know if you listen to this podcast on the reg, I have a drink every week. This week I've got two because I'm greedy, and why not? I've got a coffee and black coffee, and I've also got a glass of pure orange juice, and it's the one with the juicy bits in it. Do you like the bits or do you not like the bits? I don't know. Let me know. I personally love them. They're lovely. The other thing I've got to say, there's quite a bit actually to say before I crack on. One of the key things I'm going to say today is, as I mentioned, I've been like sort of dicking about at home a little bit, messing around with bits and pieces. This podcast is something I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. I'm doing it as I normally do. I'm recording it at home in my gaff, in my living room, using a microphone, and I'm doing it all in one take as I always do. That's why it's called the Take One podcast. But today I've also got my computer on, and what I'm trying to do today is I'm experimenting a little bit with like how maybe I can put some visuals with this podcast as well. So what I'm essentially doing is, while I'm doing this podcast, I've got the computer in front of me. I'm running through a presentation that effectively like reinforces what I'm saying. I'm going to have a look afterwards and see what it looks like. And if it's any good, I'll put it up onto YouTube or something. And perhaps I'll even start giving the teacher sociology a run for her money. Probably not. But if you are already on YouTube and you don't know about the teacher sociology, whack that in. I think it's all capital letters. The teacher sociology. She's wonderful. She's got loads and loads of videos. She's definitely going to be able to help you out. So if you don't know about her, have a look. Am I going to get better than her? I very much doubt it. So basically, this podcast is going to be a bit like a cross between a podcast and a lesson, without me actually being there to teach the lesson. I don't really know what this podcast is, but I wanted to experiment with it and recording some stuff like this. As you know, this lockdown doesn't look like it's going to lift anytime soon, and it might be something I start doing for my own students as well. So I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but we just have to see how it goes. So there we go. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, by the way, if you're listening to something, where's all the sociology stuff? If I were you, I'd probably fast forward about 5 minutes or so, because I'm going to get to that in a minute. But before we go any further, I've got to do some shout outs. Now, there are a few special shout outs to do, first of all. Hello to any new listeners out there. Hello to any old listeners. Particularly hello to anyone who's listening at home in the UK or Ireland. Hello to all of you. And also to anyone listening around the world. I've grabbed some new listeners recently from very far-flung parts of the world. But just a brief hello to anyone in Europe or the USA, to India, Pakistan, Japan, konnichiwa to you, and arigato, Brazil, Kenya, Russia, Zimbabwe, Indonesia, all of these countries are representing. I think I'm going to basically blow my own trumpet here. I think I've got someone listening in every continent in the world apart from Antarctica. So that's absolutely incredible. Hello from my flat in the east of England. Shout out as well to anyone who's listened to this on iTunes podcast, who's 5-starred this podcast. Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you as well to anyone who's recommended this to someone else or told them about it. If you've listened to this, and plenty of you have, and if you found it useful, the best way that you can say thanks to me is by spreading the word and slapping on those 5-star reviews on iTunes. Basically, because I'm like just not going out much, I'm getting a little bit sort of stir crazy. I basically want to be one of the top listed sociology podcasts in the world, and that's the way you could do it. Wouldn't it be hilarious if some bloke in his living room just talking into his phone manages to be like one of the top sociology podcasts? I would find it hilarious. So that's something else that I'm quite interested in. Shout outs properly. Right. You will know if you are on the Instagram that every Wednesday, well, every day of the week, I do a quiz, an easy, medium and a hard question. And on a Wednesday, I do a world-class Wednesday question. So this is one that's supposed to be a little bit more difficult, and I ask people to actually tell me what they think the answer is rather than picking from a predefined list of multiple choice answers. So the question when was it? Last Wednesday, a couple of Wednesdays ago, was all about what research. I did a bunch of questions on Anne Oakley, so I did a world-class Wednesday question on what research methods was Anne Oakley famous for using. Essentially, what I was looking for is something qualitative. She did a lot of different kind of methods, but Anne Oakley was a qualitative sociologist, as many feminists are. She really used things like semi-structured, unstructured interviews and participant observation, as well as some other bits and pieces. Now, there were an awful lot of you that got this right. It was from the 25th of March, 2020. So I'm going to go through those of you who have got this right. Well done to you if it's you. Sorry if I've butchered your name. Here we go with the names. Right, we've got Stav, Gabby Shedwick, Sarah.263, Vivid Colours 13, well done to you. Monotones Normie, Tasha Jen, Chairjam, KT_Jane, well done to you. Jens, Swifty, hello, Farhana Bomb, I guess, well done to you. Oscar Stokes, again, rocking it. Well done, Oscar, very good, mate. ADAMSA, cool name, by the way. Hannah Summers, Alex Williams Scussons, well done to you. Chloe 210587, well done you. Indian Kids, seen you up here a couple of times, well done, Indian Kids. Peltz 1978, Sana.A__. Marshall must die, there he is again. He will not die, he keeps coming back and getting his questions right. Very well done, Marshall. Hope uni's going well for you. Who have I got? Ellie McQueen, well done you. Davina Potter, who's a regular on here, well done, Davina. Hello to you. Daisy Mack, Sajnak Paulina, well done to you. The one whose name I can't pronounce, DICKOCF7, well done to you, seen you a few times. Erin Lilly, well done. Jack Ted Smith, again, knocking it about there, well done, mate. XX_Megan, 2004_XX. Travis, 16. L FletCE, well done to you. Tface.FCP, well done to you. H Robinson 40, well done. Abby Farrell, well done. And Shell by well done to you. Tilly Gerard and 5 lives. That's everybody who got that world-class Wednesday question correct on the 25th of March. Well done, everybody. Aren't you wonderful? I'm also going to give a very quick shout out as well, because basically for a while, this podcast has been going for 5 months now. And for about the first 3 months, I didn't tell anyone I'd done it. I just sort of did it and like left it on Instagram, and like a couple of people picked it up. I've started to actually tell people I'm doing this now. So I've told all my mates about it. So I'm going to give a quick hello to and a bit of a shout out to all of my friends who, not all of my friends because there's too many to count, but those of them who have definitely listened to this. So shout out to the boys, Greg, Josh, Tom, Luke, Dan, Simon, Ely, Rob, Emmy, and hi, obviously, to my mum and dad, who always get a shout out every single week. That's all the shout outs done, I think. I think it's now time for me to move on. So we're going to start off today by thinking about the functionalist views on crime and deviance. Now, I'm going to run this by thinking about, as I say, it's quite a basic approach to this, but I'm going to consider like what might a functionalist say about crime and deviance, and then I'm going to start looking at the sort of sociologists you might need to know. So, I mean, there's a lot to say about this, and if I'm honest, I could have done half an hour podcast on functionalism, half an hour on Marxism, feminism, etc., etc. So it's going to take me about 5 minutes to run through some of the main bits and pieces. But what might a functionalist say about crime and deviance in society? Well, one of the key things to be aware of is that for functionalists, particularly someone like Durkheim, the founding father of functionalism, crime can be a positive or a functional thing for society, and it can be this in many, many different ways. Like, for one, it reminds us of our norms and values and why these things are important. So, for instance, if someone's breaking the law, you know that's wrong, and it reinforces to you, it reminds you about why that is wrong. It helps us also understand sort of situations where crime and factors leading to crime are more likely to occur as well. So, for instance, if you think about some sort of more modern crimes, things that have come about since since the sort of the birth of the internet 20 years ago, whatever, things like cyber hacking. Yes, it's a crime, but if we know that this is happening, we can, and it exposes security flaws in websites, we know that those are things that need to be fixed. So in that respect, it can also, again, help us understand social situations and help improve them so that things don't happen again. I think the other thing we can say as well is it also, like, functionalism suggests that crime can be functional because it can change laws for the better. And an example I always give about this is the example from Martin Luther King in America in the 1950s and 60s, when he was on his civil rights crusade. He was arrested 29 times during his fight for civil rights. All he was doing effectively was raising awareness and drawing attention to the fact of the inequality in American society. But he was arrested 29 times for doing those things. And some of those things probably like justifiable, but many of them absolutely not. So again, we can see there that crime has enabled us to change laws so that we have like fair protesting and peaceful protesting laws and things like that now, so that we don't have this situation where people who are innocent and are just trying to put their point across get arrested, for instance. Okay. I think another way in which crime crime could be functional or positive for society by reaffirming these norms and values. Durkheim referred to this as boundary maintenance, knowing where the boundaries lie, knowing what is and what isn't acceptable in society. Okay, so if you're watching on the YouTube, I've just drawn up a picture. I haven't drawn it, I've got it off the internet, haven't I? Just put a picture of Martin Luther King on the thing there. So there we go, it's a nice little picture. What sociologists do I need to know and use? I've already mentioned Durkheim and his boundary maintenance, but Durkheim, you've got to include him. He is like the main guy when it comes to functionalist, and most of the functionalist ideas stem from what Durkheim said. So Durkheim's got this idea of collective sentiments. And what collective sentiments are, like, they're the things, the knowledge and understanding that we share in society and know is right or wrong. So when a bad crime happens, it reminds us of what is wrong, and it helps to strengthen our society. For instance, through people having this collective sense of boundary maintenance, having this sense of that is wrong, isn't it terrible, isn't it awful? And it reminds us about our value consensus in society. So the example I give, I'll give a couple of examples for this, but like, you may remember when there were some heinous, horrible terrorist attacks in places like France, and we had the Charlie Hebdo attacks a few years ago now, must have been about 4 or 5 years ago now. A lot of people, what they did was they, on their Facebook social media profiles, they put like a tricolor, a French flag, like, what do you call it, like a filter over their Facebook photo. So lots of people had the French flag as their Facebook photo. What people were doing with this was a collective sentiment. They were getting together and saying, I believe in freedom. I believe that France should carry on to do as it is doing, and we shouldn't let these terrorists win. It's an example of everyone getting together, doing something collectively to show the sentiment that they do not agree with that particular crime for instance. Another example, it's not necessarily related to crime and deviance, but collective sentiment. At the moment, what we've got this coronavirus outbreak and crisis in the UK, and everyone is absolutely 100% justifiably proud of and thankful for the work done by frontline services like NHS, social care, even delivery drivers, food workers, those kind of things. And every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, what's happening in the UK is people are getting out of their houses and clapping or making a big load of noise and showing their appreciation for these people. That's a collective sentiment. It's not one that necessarily applies to crime, but that's exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. Now, for Durkheim as well, he said that when many bad crimes occur or happen at once, or there are sort of riots and sort of normlessness, it's anomie. It's a situation of normlessness. And when we've got this, crime tends to rise because it's the idea that we don't know what we're supposed to do in society, and there's not as many norms as there are. I mean, at the moment, again, I've talked about this in the last podcast, we've got a high state of anomie at the moment because things aren't working as they normally do. People aren't going out to work, etc., etc. For Durkheim, he said that basically too much crime in society is not functional because we can't control it. Too little crime is not functional because we have no sense of shared norms and values. So we need just about the right amount of crime in society in order for it to be functional for us. Excuse me, I'm going to have a quick sip of coffee. Now we're going to move on to Merton. So Merton, Robert Merton, 20th century functionalist, used Durkheim's link between anomie and high crime rates and said that anomie, this time of normlessness when we have more crime, is created through what he calls strain. Now, strain for Merton is the thing that exists between an individual's desires and goals that they want to achieve and their likelihood or their means of achieving those goals. Okay, so strain is what happens. It's the gap that exists between something you want to happen and that thing actually happen. How are you going to get that thing, or how are you going to make that thing happen? That's what Durkheim does as well. But what Robert Merton refers to as strain. So I'm going to have a look at Merton's strain theory in a little bit more detail here. So as I mentioned, strain theory is the gap that exists between the desire to achieve something in life and the chance of actually achieving that thing. Now that gap that exists between those two things, that creates strain because it's not always easy to get the things you want. So you might say, for instance, I want to be a millionaire. Great. How are you going to get it? Are you going to go through all the normal channels and what Merton called the legitimate means, the ways we should be going through these things, or are you going to adopt illegitimate means? Now, Merton describes 5 different approaches or reactions to strain, and I'm going to run through them briefly for you. So there's 5 of them. The first couple are not criminal, but the numbers 3, 4, and 5 could well be criminal. So the first reaction to strain is what Merton calls conformity. And effectively, people are just conforming. They're continuing about their lives, conforming to society's norms and values, and keeping those goals that they want to achieve in the back of their minds. They're thinking, it might happen one day. If I keep working, keep saving, it might well happen. Okay, so very much not a criminal or a deviant approach to that. Then we've got the idea of ritualism. Again, not a deviant or certainly not a criminal approach to strain. Ritualism is the idea where people continue about their lives in a ritualistic fashion, but they've often given up on ever achieving those goals. So they'll go through the motions of life in a ritual, and they will still think about that goal, but they will accept the fact it's not going to happen. So if I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm never going to do that working in Tesco's or whatever. I'm never going to do it working as a cleaner because I'm not going to earn enough money to be a millionaire. So people kind of just go through the processes, but don't worry too much about that goal. They've kind of forgotten it as such. Then we start looking at some of the more interesting responses to strain. So the third one is Merton's idea of innovation. Innovation means you're just kind of like changing something, what you do. So people realize that they're not going to achieve their goals in normal life, so they'll innovate their methods. They'll change their methods, often in a criminal way, in order to achieve them. So someone who's having a sort of an innovative approach to strain might think, well, you know, you can work all of your life and never get rich, or you can just go rob a bank and get rich quick like that. So what's the point in working in a bank all your life? You might as well just go out and rob the bank, and that will actually help you make a millionaire. By the way, please do not rob banks. I'm not suggesting or advocating anybody do that. Please don't do that. The other one is retreatism. So this is the fourth of Merton's 5 approaches to strain. Retreatism is fundamentally linked to things like drug addiction and alcohol dependency and things like that. So people realize they're not going to achieve their goals, they give up on them, and they retreat from society. And this response can really help to explain why people use drugs or become homeless. They know they're not going to achieve what they want to. They know there's no point going through the legitimate means to do it. They've effectively dropped out and retreated out of life. And then the final one is rebellion. Again, potentially a criminal response to strain. People are rejecting the norms and the goals of society, and they're completely rebelling against them. So they don't even want to achieve anything. They haven't got these things. In fact, they might have their own kind of counter achievements that they want to achieve. So I often refer to things like terrorism and stuff. I've completely rejected the whole idea of being successful, or the value of what we consider to be successful in this society. I've given that up. I'm not going to bother with it, but I do have another goal that's going to completely rebel against what society wants me to do. So that's a little bit about Merton strain theory. And if you're watching on YouTube now, you've just seen that I've flipped up my beautiful slide, or whatever it is, beautiful picture thing that I made on Merton strain theory a few weeks ago and stuck it up onto Instagram. So go and have a look at that. I explain all of this in a really, really simple one picture format. Okay. So what we're doing now, we're doing some feminism. I'm going to have a quick sip of coffee again. So again, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what a feminist might say about crime and deviance, and then we're going to look at a couple of sociologists that we might need to know or to use to support our arguments on this. So when it comes to feminism, coffee time, there's a couple of arguments. And I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth on this, purely because I just want to communicate the basics of this, and there's plenty of reading to do beyond this, okay? But what might a feminist say about crime and deviance? Well, they're going to say that most criminals are men. Feminists might argue that most men, let me start this all again. Feminists might argue that men are more likely to commit crime because of gender socialization, right? So if you think about the ways in which boys and girls are socialized through those agents like the family, education, media, peer group, any of those kind of things, that's effectively what an awful lot of feminists are getting. So if you want to use your examples of, for instance, your Anne Oakleys and your canalization and your manipulation, or you even want to use your Becky Francis's domination of space, that can all apply into this. Absolutely. You're just taking an idea from a different part of the course and applying it to prove that gender socialization does see boys to be raised in a more active, aggressive role, taking more risks. Women, girls, tend to be more passive and less active and more risk averse than men. Now that's like one of the arguments from feminists is that men are socialized to be more criminal and women are socialized to be less criminal. It's not that straightforward, but for the benefit of this, it is. So I think the other thing we've got to think of is the element of patriarchy. And lots of feminists would argue that not only are most criminals men, but also that the criminal justice system, so the system, the judiciary, the police, the criminal, the prison service, penal system, those kind of things, those are basically run by men. And it's kind of true if you look at the gender statistics for judges and top police people, etc., etc. Most judges in crown courts are male, and until relatively recently, most domestic abuse incidents were not actually viewed as criminal cases by the police. So if there'd been like a domestic incident and the police were called, 20 years ago or something like that, 20, 30 years ago, the police would come around and basically wouldn't want to have anything to do with it, because they'd just say, no, this is a domestic incident, it's not a civil matter, therefore it's happened in your home, you can sort it out. I mean, isn't that crazy? And so you can kind of see where a lot of feminists are coming from, that the system is patriarchal and it works in the interests of men. So often feminists might argue that men are let off more easily, that the criminal justice system doesn't take things like domestic abuse and domestic violence as seriously, any crimes that affect women not taken as seriously, those kind of things. Okay. So I'm going to have a look at a couple of feminists you might want to draw on when it comes to supporting these arguments. So Frances Hydenson says very much an advocate of that gender socialization argument. So she says that women are socialized to behave in certain ways, and she refers to this as female conformity, which limits female freedom. It's this expectation that women should be passive and controllable and not with their own ideas and that kind of stuff. And what Hydenson says is that girls grow up in this form of gender socialization, they get used to it, but it continues into later life and marriage. So when you're at home and school, you're being socialized by your family and by your education institution. Then you're socialized into your workplace if you go to work, and also through the institution of marriage as well. So if we think about the ways in which even the wedding vows, to have to hold for better for worse, for richer for poorer, to death for us part, a man only has to pledge to love and honour his wife, a wife must pledge to love, honour and obey her husband. So one small example there about how men control women in families and marriages and things like that. And the argument goes is that for Heidenson, that women have been socialised to conform into this kind of pattern of behaviour. And because women don't have as many top jobs, they don't have the opportunity to commit things like corporate crime. So women have been socialised into this female conformity role, which suggests that they don't commit as much crime. And if they did want to, they don't often have the opportunities to do this. So I'm going to pull in someone here from not necessarily a crime and deviance sociologist, but Angela McRobbie, you'll probably be aware of if you've studied education. Again, going down this gender socialisation route. So she talks about girls being socialised into a bedroom culture, which effectively means that whilst boys go out and about playing football and get into trouble or whatever in the evenings, girls don't. They stay at home and they will read, or they'll lie on the bed, or they'll talk to their friends on the phone, or they'll do some schoolwork. And because of this, again, this way in which girls are socialised in the family, it gives them less opportunity to go out and get involved in crime. There's more of an expectation for girls to be at home, working or chatting to their friends or whatever else. The chance of them going out to commit crime is going to be lower purely because of the way in which they've been socialised, okay? But to throw up some, well, I always use that phrase, by the way, throw up, and it's not the best phrase to use because it sounds like I'm being sick. Believe me, I'm not. I'm going to give you the example as well of Denscombe. So a bit of evaluation to all of this, which, you know, it's not hard to evaluate and criticise this argument. It's very two-dimensional. But Denscombe disagrees with all of this and suggests actually that in recent years, certainly the last sort of 20, 30 years, we've had a ladette culture in the UK. In young women, where young women will go out and be more bolshy, will get into street fights, will potentially be involved in petty crime, will be involved in drunk and disorderly behaviour. And so for Denscombe, she says that a lot of the feminist view about gender socialisation is really out of date. And it kind of is if you think about it. We've got this view, a lot of the work that we look at in sociology is based from the 1970s and things that was 40, 50 years ago. You know, things have changed since then. So Denscombe, the idea of ladette culture to criticise the idea that women don't have the opportunities to commit crime through gender socialisation. Okay, another quick sip of coffee and we're going to rock into Marx. So what's the Marxist view on crime and deviance? Well, you know, it's the same as everything, isn't it? If we understand that Marxists are always suggesting that society and the parts of society work in the interests of the ruling class, it's going to be the same with crime and deviance, okay? So because the ritual ruling class controls society, they also have the opportunity to control the laws and the judiciary and the police service to make sure that those things reflect their interests. Marxists, in a nutshell, argue that richer people are more likely to get away with committing crimes because either the police or the law enforcement agencies turn a blind eye, or because there's actually laws to protect them. And one of the things that's often talked about from Marxists is about property and ownership of property. And I think it's true to say that there are more laws concerning property than any other type of thing. And so that is a really good example to explain how and why Marxists argue that the rich and the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, control laws and policies and the criminal justice system in their own interests. Okay. Obviously, on contrast to that, the working class get disproportionately punished for their involvement that they have in crime. Okay. So let's go on a cough quickly. Excuse me, I don't have corona. I've just got a very dry mouth at the moment. So yeah, I've just mentioned that all, like most laws are about property and only the rich own property. The other thing you might want to use as examples when we use the Marxistics argument. So Marxistics argument, that's a mix between example and argument. I might use that as the word. When we use the Marxist argument or example or the X-argument, whatever you want to do, use those corporate crimes, things like tax evasion, things like embezzlement, like fraud, all of those kind of things that are often overlooked in favour of more visible working class crimes as well. They're harder to catch, those types of crimes. You need more people looking into it. You need to do more investigation. You need more evidence. It's much more difficult to trace that than it is to watch someone robbing a TV out of a shop window, for instance. So what's the ultimate reason for this? Well, as with everything for Marxists, it all comes down to capitalism and the pursuit of profit and money, which creates this idea of consumerism. So if we live in a world where we're constantly buying and selling stuff, we have this desire to buy more stuff. That's what consumerism is. And Marx was really was not a fan of consumerism. It's the want for more material stuff. Now, because the working classes can't afford that, they lack the means to get it, Marxists might argue that one of the reasons why working class people turn to crime and why perhaps there is more working class crime is because that they do not have the legitimate means through fair pay for their work to actually access the stuff that they want to buy. So really, I'm going to look at like one key Marxist when we consider the Marxist approach to crime and deviance, and it's William Chambliss. Now, Chambliss, love his argument because I think it's really good. His main concept is called the differential enforcement of the law. And basically what this means is that he believes that the police focus far more time, effort and resources on catching working class criminals committing visible working class crimes like robbery or theft or street crime and those kind of things, because the police are working in the interests of the rich and the powerful. There's no reason for them to focus on middle class crime and white collar crime or corporate crime, because that's going to disadvantage the middle classes. Instead, we're going to focus our attention far more on those visible working class crimes. And this is what Chambliss calls differential enforcement of the law. He studied a whole bunch of like different types of crimes, and what his idea was effectively is things like what we might refer to as middle class or corporate or white collar crimes, things like bribery and fraud. They're often not detected by police. Now, whether that's because they're just not looking into them or whether because it's harder to catch is difficult to say. But I think Chambliss's argument is definitely the idea that the police and the law enforcement, my voice today is terrible, isn't it? The law enforcement agencies focus disproportionate attention on working class crimes because they're easier to catch, and they're the sorts of people that the bourgeoisie want to kind of disadvantage. So the new right as well, right? So the new right, you might have heard of the new right previously through the family and stuff like that. If you're studying maybe a little bit higher level than the GCSE, you'll probably know the new right is very similar to right realists. So effectively only use those two terms interchangeably, right realists and the new right. If you know anything about the new right, go back to Charles Murray. Charles Murray doesn't like certain types of families, lone parent families, because he thinks that they're going to cause a culture of poverty in society. And effectively, Murray uses very similar arguments when he talks about crime as well. So the new right would argue that crime is getting worse because of the breakdown of the family and society. And as I've said already, if we've got lone parent families, Murray and the new right's argument is effectively that young boys especially don't have a male role model, and so they don't know the rights and wrongs of society, and they fall into the bad crowd and effectively they get into trouble. Okay, so Murray blames a lot of this sort of squarely on family setup. But he looks particularly at sort of street crime, so robbery, theft, burglary, which is more likely to be committed by the working class and younger people purely through the nature of the crime itself and the potential reward available from it. So because this type of crime, as I said earlier, is visible, it's very easy to see, and it can be amplified by the media and through moral panics. And what Murray and the new right say is that there's this culture of poverty in society which encourages people to commit crime to fund lifestyles that they desire but they can't really afford or obtain legally or legitimately. So we think about, you know, people who want the latest iPhone, or they want the latest pair of Nikes on their feet, or they want the latest tracksuit or whatever, I don't know, like, but they won't necessarily have a job that can afford that. How are you going to get it? Well, perhaps the opportunity for you, given the fact that there's so much pressure on people to conform, you know, and have the latest stuff, perhaps the criminal route is the only available one to someone like that. So again, I've talked all the way through this about Charles Murray, and he's the guy you need to know, because he says there's an underclass in society. It's the class below the working class. It's people who survive on benefits and other government welfare and things like that. And he argues basically that anyone who's in the underclass will almost certainly have a criminal lifestyle in order to justify and live according to their means. So Murray talks about our society being characterized as a culture of poverty for those in the underclass, where the poorest in society turn to crime because they've rejected the values of work and education. They don't want to get on, and effectively they see that as a legitimate opportunity through which to actually make money. So that's the argument from the new right. If just very quickly to mention, the left realist view doesn't necessarily blame the individuals. When we take the new right or the right realist view, what's the cause of crime? It's individuals and the way in which they've been socialized and their family and all that kind of stuff. If we take a left realist view, they don't blame the individual or they don't blame socialization and stuff like that. What they do rather is focus on like the environmental and the social factors. So rather than someone just wanting to be a criminal, or not wanting to be bothered to go out and get a job, perhaps it's more about the fact that there's great inequalities in educational achievement amongst different people. Perhaps it's due to regional inequalities between people even within the same county or the same town or the same city. Perhaps it's more due to I don't know, anything else other than that. It's about social factors rather than individual factors. Okay, so that's a bit on the new right and right realists. We're coming towards the end of this. I've got a couple more to go through. I'm going to cover the interactionist view as well after a quick sip of coffee. As I mentioned in the intro, you might not recognise the name interactionism, but I guarantee you'll recognise some of the ideas that come about with this. So if you've studied education before, or stratification or anything like that at GCSE or A-level, you'll be aware of the idea of labelling. And effectively, that's what the interactionist view on crime and deviance is. So everyone has their own opinion of criminal stereotypes, and interactionists say that this opinion of criminals, of what a criminal is socially constructed, and there is no such typical criminal that actually exists. Anyone could be a criminal. Anyone who breaks the law is a criminal. So if you go 31 miles an hour in a 30 limit, effectively you've broken the law. If you are taking illegal drugs, you have broken the law. If you are, I don't know, robbing the supermarket, you have broken the law. But we only have ever actually kind of come to this agreement of what a criminal is because it's been socially constructed. We've said at some point, when someone does this, they become a criminal. When someone does this, they do become a criminal. Okay, but when someone is labelled as a criminal, this is a label that's incredibly hard to shift and to shake off. And what an interactionist, like someone like Becker, might describe a big, strong label as criminal, might become known as something as a master status. And it's the main thing that someone thinks about us, or the main thing that makes up our identity. So it's like if I gave you the name of somebody, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a Billie Eilish or whatever, immediately you will have something that crops into your head that you associate with that person. It might be singer, pop star, I don't know, whatever it might be, right? And that's like what we consider to be the master status. So when we think of a criminal, that's the master status label that's very, very difficult to shake off. I'm trying to think of a criminal, Myra Hindley, oh God, that's such an old example, or I don't know, what's that geezer called? Ian Huntley, I think his name was. You might, as soon as I mention that name, if you know who these people are, you might have that initial instant association of, criminal. And that's what Becker calls a master status. So talking about Becker, again, I mean, what is a criminal? Is only a criminal when we label someone as a criminal. And I've said criminal about 1 million times there, but that's the nature of the Crime and Deviance podcast, I suppose. And criminal is this master status. It's very hard to remove, very, very difficult to remove, particularly by agents of social control. So, for instance, the police, if you're a criminal and you've been in a few times, you've got a criminal record, that's a very hard label, not that I know, of course, but a very hard label to shake off, very hard master status to shake off. And so what we then find is that the cousin of labelling, which is self-fulfilling prophecy, starts to set in. So if someone's been labelled as a criminal by society, and particularly by the agents of social control, by the police, etc., then perhaps that individual starts to believe that themselves, and they start to then acting out their life as a criminal. And Becker, again, uses a further term to describe what happens when people sort of get this self-fulfilling prophecy and it sets into them, and he describes it as a deviant career. So people get labelled as a criminal, which we've described as a master status, because it's a very heavy label, very difficult to shake off. Once that master status sets in, it's very difficult to shake off, particularly with like agents of social control. So the self-fulfilling prophecy sets in, you start to believe that you're a criminal or becoming more of a criminal, and as a result of this, Becker refers to criminals who are following this self-fulfilling prophecy as having a deviant career, where they'll never seek to actually make a legitimate living. They'll constantly go down that illegitimate, illegal route, okay, just as a result of labelling and self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's a little bit about interactionism and labelling and Becker. And just onto the final bit that I want to cover today, which is on subcultural theory. Now, subcultural theory, you won't really come across it in many other topics other than crime and deviance, but when you do come across crime and deviance, it's worth using because it's one of those theories that's applicable in so many different ways. So what might a subcultural theorist have to say about crime and deviance in society? Well, effectively, subcultures. So subcultures are a group within a culture, a smaller group within a culture with its own norms and values, okay? And often these norms and values tend to be deviant or at odds with society, and many times the norms and values are criminal. So we might look particularly at particular crimes that are associated with subcultures. We generally think of like younger people. So we might think about things like drug abuse and violence and those kind of things. So thinking about things that particular groups in society might get up to. It's not going to be everybody. So you can't imagine, Mrs. Miggins, who's 81 down the road. I don't think she's going to be listening to grime and smoking spliffs and like having punch-ups and stuff. This will be reflective of a particular group in society. And within these groups, the subcultural argument goes that the way people gain status is through kind of acting out these countercultural norms and values, okay? So gaining status through adhering to the norms and values of the subculture, but not of the wider culture. And as I've mentioned already, those two will often be different. So looking at a couple of sociologists here, we've got to kind of cover the two Cohens. So Albert Cohen, he looked at delinquent subcultures in working class communities, particularly focusing on young male subcultures. And he said that effectively, because they're young, because they're working class, because they're materially and culturally deprived, they suffer what he calls status frustration. They're peed off with their situation in life. They're unaccepting of the fact that they might not be able to get where they want to go, certainly through like legitimate legal means. And so they turn to crime to achieve their goals that they're unable to get through legal means. So this is Cohen's argument of working class youth subcultures who experience status frustration because they're materially and culturally deprived, and so they turn to crime to achieve their goals because they're not going to be able to get to meet those goals through legitimate means. For example, what do I mean by like material deprivation? Lack of money. What do I mean by cultural deprivation? Lack of skills, lack of qualifications, lack of ambition, lack of ability to know how to apply for jobs and that kind of stuff, okay? The other Cohen we're going to look at, it's no relation, by the way, it's Stan Cohen. I mentioned a bit about Stan Cohen in my previous podcast on coronavirus when I pulled in the idea of moral panics and folk devils. And again, this is really where Cohen's work comes in. He's looking at smaller groups of, again, working class, young, mainly men, but not entirely, groups. And his study was focused on the two youth groups, two subcultural groups of the mods and rockers who were associated with sort of sporadic violence throughout Britain in the 1960s and the 1970s, very much associated with drugs, very much associated with music as well, and very, very similar, dressed the same. So you've got the mods dressing in their Parker jackets and their like very sort of smart, tight cut clothes. You've got the rockers in their leathers, they're slightly baggier, more greasy style. So very, very identifiable groups. But when it comes to like kind of criticising, I suppose, the subcultural view, many people have done this, and I think it's a very fair argument because you can't pinpoint all crime down to subcultures, and you can't pinpoint all crime that happens in groups just down to subcultural values, in my personal opinion. And I agree with Matzo on this because he says that he doesn't agree with subcultural theory. He argues that anyone can actually drift in or out of crime at any time. So ordinary people commit crime and excuse it, and they give excuses like, oh, why were you speeding? I was in a rush. Why did you do that? Oh, I was drunk. And so what Matz is arguing is that it's not necessarily a subcultural thing because it can come down to an individual element of a subculture basis on a small group. But Matz is looking at a more individual level and saying that ordinary people can commit crime, can excuse it through some sort of excuse like I was drunk or I was in a rush or I didn't know what I was doing, those kind of things. Okay, so whilst we've got the subcultural view, it doesn't always mean that every single crime is committed through subcultural means or can be explained subculturally. Okay, so there we go. There we have it. I've actually finished the podcast, which is amazing. These always seem to go a lot quicker, and I'm sure they don't for you, your own listening, but they certainly go a lot quicker than I imagined that they would do. So what we got to do now? Well, we're doing an outro. So that's basically me done for today. I'm going to go over what we've covered in a minute. No, actually, I'm going to go over it now. What have we covered today? Well, we've gone through some of, like, I think about 5 different main theories that look at crime and deviance. I started off by looking at the arguments of functionalism and suggesting how crime can be positive and functional in our society by looking at the work of Emil Durkheim. And then I moved on to have a look at how Merton took on ideas from Durkheim, introduced the idea of strain and responses to strain. And he looked at 5 different explanations, 3 of which could be criminal reactions to strain. So he looked at innovation, which is the idea that you change what you're doing. He looked at ritualism, which is you just carry on doing what you're doing, but you give up on your goals. He looked at the idea of innovation. Have I talked about innovation already? Let me go back to see what I've done. I've forgotten. So if you're now watching the YouTube, you're watching me go back through a PowerPoint. This is super fun. That's it. Conformity, beg your pardon. Conformity. People continue about their lives and hoping that they might achieve their goals. They go through rituals, so they forget about their goals. They just carry on their lives. The 3 criminal responses could be innovation, so innovating on what you already do, perhaps in an illegitimate means. So, for instance, I gave the example of rather than working in a bank, you might just rob a bank. Retreatism, where you kind of give up on your goals and your means of achieving them, to go in and fall into drugs or alcoholism or something like that. And then also rebellion, whereby someone might reject society's norms and their goals and their ability of achieving them, and go down the route of countercultural kind of goals like terrorism and things like that. I also spent a bit of time talking to you about the feminist view. So we looked at what feminists might argue, and we said basically that women are socialized different to men, which is why men commit more crimes than women, but also that the criminal justice system can be patriarchal because it's highly kind of led by and dominated by men. We took a moment to explain the Marxist view. So we argued basically that because the ruling class in society own and run society, they also run the criminal justice system, and it will reflect their views. And ultimately, if we take the ideas of someone like William Chambliss, the idea that police have a differential enforcement of the law, so they focus disproportionately on working class crimes because they're easier to catch and they're easy to beat. And then we started looking at the new right. So effectively, new right argument, or the right realist argument, is Charles Murray blaming poor people for committing crime because there's this culture of poverty. And he argues basically that we're never going to get beyond this because it's very visible types of crime. It's amplified by the media. And because of the structural misgivings in our society and the fact that these people aren't socialized correctly, they will then turn to crime as a result of achieving their goals. And then we finished off there by thinking about the interactionist view. So effectively arguing that people only become criminals when they're labelled as criminals. These are very strong labels, they're known as master statuses, and that if you follow and believe your own master status, a self-fulfilling prophecy will set in and you will end up on a deviant career. Okay, so that was effectively the argument from interactionism. And then I've just finished off with a subcultural view, arguing that effectively crime can be explained through the alternate norms and values of subcultural groups versus wider society. So having a look there at the ideas of Albert Cohen and status frustration, a quick glimpse at the case study of Stan Cohen, Mods and Rockers, Moral Panics, and then finally having a quick criticism from David Matzer, who says that people can just drift in and out of this kind of stuff. So there we go. Not bad, eh? Not bad. We've gone through everything. I've gone through what I've done today. So I'm just going to cover off a couple more shout outs today before I finish up today. So very recently, I think this was the other day, when was it? Wednesday. It's Friday today. So it must have been the 1st of April. The World Class Wednesday question on Instagram was this: what is the specific term for having more than one husband at one time? I was looking for something very specific here. And the word I was looking for was polyandry. Lots and lots and lots of people got this correct. So I'm going to go through the world-class winners from Wednesday, the 1st of April. But just very quickly to say, I had a message from someone called Holly Riggs XX, who couldn't quite remember the name of polyandry, but she said, it's not polygamy, it's the other one. And you're absolutely right, Holly, it is the other one. It's polyandry. And anyone who did say polygamy, you are technically correct, but I did ask you to be specific, so I'm not shouting you out. Bloody good job and all, because there's about 100 of you. So in no particular order, well done to all these people here. Apologies if I get your names wrong. Udipan Misra, Jack Ted Smith, Katie Elizabeth 16, All Things Sociological, H Robinson 40, Lummers 229, Peltz 1978, A Maniac 9, Shireen Begum 89, Kabir's Khan, Ellie McQueen, well done, I think that's 2 for you. Joe David, 1965. Tom Crabtree, LFLETCE, well done you. This girl Rosington, Janos Luna, I'm really sorry, it starts YANOSE and then I can't do it, sorry, but well done to you. For Hannah F. Bomb, well done. Joker's Wisdom for Life, well done. Georgia Whelan, nice one, Georgia. Jess Saggio, well done. Katie_Jane, well done. Maria.VH_, well done. Fergus.VM, well done you. CFS Sociology, I guess that's a school account, well done to CFS. Big up yourselves. Mariner, well done to you. Where's J.Exe, good one. Tom.Nibbles, lovely name, Tom, well done. Tate.Aged, well done you. Mumita, well done. FFS Emily, well done to you. Oscar Stokes again, unbelievable. Amber Pattinson 7628, well done. Ali Shamina, nice one to you, Ali. Sadia Ali, well done. Josh Barker Free, well done, Josh. Layla Lalit Meta 1712, well done to you. Marshall Must Die in there again. Madiha 1605, well done to you. I_need to get a life, me too, but well done to you. Stacey Santos, well done Stacey. MX_key, well done to you. Minnie T Brown, well done to you. I think I'm nearly there, I don't know. Ewan Broughton 03, well done to you. Molly Soames, well done to you. Molly Davina Potter, well done to you. Nell.png, well done to you. Now I have got no idea how I'm going to pronounce this. GUGYNBDEHCBOLNMM. Thanks for making that really easy to pronounce, but well done to you. The Twines_198096, well done to you. Georgie_WO, well done to you. And I think this is the last 5. We've got Alex Bennett 11, well done Alex. Freya Siddle, well done to you. Jamie Elfin, well done to you. Spamilia and H.WDK. Well done to all of you people. You have done incredibly well and you should be very, very proud of yourselves. Not least because you've got through the whole of the podcast. And that's it really for me for today. So what's coming up next? Well, I'm going to do another couple of these. A few people have asked me to do them on beliefs in society. And religion and those kind of things. I know it's not the one that everyone wants, but again, if you want me to do something and you want a podcast on something, now is the time to get your requests in, because I've probably got more time now than I'm going to have for the rest of my life. So let me know if you want me to cover anything. Thank you again to everyone hit me up on Instagram and getting involved in the student takeover. I think it's going to be really, really good. Thank you again for everyone who's listened. Thank you for your likes and your shares and your 5-star reviews and all that. That's awesome. I'm going to go and have a break now and I'm going to put this together. And if this YouTube thing's worked out well, then awesome. If it hasn't, then whatever. You just have to listen to me. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much, everybody. And take care. Stay safe. Keep washing those hands. See you later, people. Bye.